Hey everybody, here we are, week 13. Thank you for being here. Today we are still in How It Works, and we are on step 4. Eric does a phenomenal job breaking this down, so please make sure that you open up your big books and take notes. Next week, week 14, we're still in How It Works. This is a longer chapter, but it's got a ton of good information on it. So we will see you next week, week 14.
Hey everybody, good to be back. Let's go ahead and get centered with the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Last week, we ended on page 64. Yeah, page 64. And last week, we got through step 3. We talked about step 3. And we talked a little bit about, we're going into step 4 now, and this is where we start to look in at ourselves. This is where we do the work. Steps 1 and 2, we don't take, we don't do. Those are realizations. We realize that we're powerless over alcohol. Our lives have become unmanageable. We realize that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. Step 3, we take with our sponsor, where we turn our will, which is our thoughts, and our lives, which are our actions. We turn our thoughts and our actions over to the care of God. And step 4, we're going to get down to causes and conditions. So step 4, we're going to do some work. And the spirit of step 4, I'm going to talk about that a little bit right now, because we can really complicate this. And I'll get into, after some reading, I'll get into how we complicate it. But it's my opinion, and I say opinion because the book doesn't specifically say this, kind of does, actually, when we just read last week about how we are like the actor who tries to run the show, always fitting the places and manipulating to make everything work out to the way that we want it to. And if everybody would just do as I say, everything would come off fine. Everyone would be pleased. But people don't do what I say. They don't do what I want, because people have their own self-will. And the more I try to manipulate that, and the more I try to make the pieces fit to the way that I want them, the more other people push back and retaliate and eventually step on my toes, and I start to feel like the world doesn't treat me right. Start to live in self-pity. So we read about that last week, and we read about that, and now we're going to figure out how we fix that. In step 4, we're going to take a look at ourselves, and we're going to find out where we do that and how we do that. So we're on page 64, first full paragraph down. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. And so the spirit of step 4 is to find out where I try to run the show, and to show me in my life how I've tried to arrange everything to suit the way that I want things to turn out, and how in doing so I step on the toes of others, they retaliate against me, and then I hold a resentment towards them and feel like they haven't treated me right, and that everyone's against me. So the spirit of it is we're trying to find out where we do that, and how we do that, and how we make decisions based on ourselves that put us in a position of being in conflict with the people around us. So therefore, we started a personal inventory. This was step 4. And step 4 took a fearless and moral inventory. And moral means having to do with the right and wrong of human behavior. So that's what we're going to look at here, the right and wrong of human behavior. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding, and there's the searching, right? We took a searching and fearless moral inventory. So it's a fact-finding. There's the searching. We're going to find some facts out about ourselves. It's a fact-finding and fact-facing process. There's the fearless, because we're going to face these facts. So it's telling me right here, I'm going to find out the facts about myself, and I'm going to face them.
Hey, look, having somebody in your life that is addicted to drugs or alcohol, it can be stressful. We totally get it. We've navigated hundreds, if not thousands of situations just like yours. This is why we developed the Family Reconnect program with you in mind, the family member or loved one. I call it the ever-changing landscape of addiction, and it can be stressful. A lot of times you get angry, frustrated, worried, scared, just a lot of emotion, but you need support. You need people like us and your peers that can come alongside you to help you navigate this situation. This is why we put this program together. We meet every Tuesday at 6 o'clock Eastern time. We're a few weeks in now, and it's an absolute blast. We love it, and we want to invite you there. So if this is something that you're interested in, go to realrecoverytalk.com/FRC, and I'll see you on Tuesday.
So it's a fact-finding and fact-facing process. It is an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. And what is the stock in trade? In our business, the stock in trade is ourselves. It's the only stock we have. I'm selling me. This is my life. I'm the stock in trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods. And the damaged and unsaleable goods is our thinking. We have a flawed way of thinking. And that's what we're getting down to here is we're going to discover our flawed way of thinking about life, about the world around me, and about the people around me. So one object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods, flawed thinking, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. And the values are the truth. Right? So I'm going to I'm embarking on a fact-finding and fact-facing mission about myself. The truth in the stock and trade about myself, and I can't fool myself any longer about the truth about me. I'm finding the truth about me, who I really am. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. Being convinced that self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us, we considered it its common manifestation. So self manifested in many ways is what has defeated us. Self is me trying to run the show, myself, exactly what we read earlier in this chapter about the actor trying to run the show. Resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stems all forms of spiritual disease. For we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. So when we talk about it being a three-part disease, it's body, mind, and spirit. I'm spiritually sick as well. My body is the allergy, the obsession is the mind, and the spirit is I'm blocked off from God. When the spiritual malady, we have been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. And this is a big part of it. We institutions as well. And like at the institution of marriage, I have a feeling about that. I think it's, whatever. Or the institution of college institutions. I also do the same thing with principles. I can have resentments against principles. I don't like people who litter, right? Whatever that principle is that you have resentment against, it's not always just people. So it's our attitude towards not just people, but the world around us. It's my thinking process. We asked ourselves why we were angry. In most cases, we found it was our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore. We were burned up. So on our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relationships, which had been interfered with? And so before I get into this, so every one of us lives life on self-will. And when people live life on self-will, eventually they threaten my basic instincts. And this is modeled off our three basic instincts, which are three basic survival instincts are self-preservation, being able to feed myself, clothe myself, have shelter, right? So as it relates to us today, that would be my job, my home, my security. The other basic instinct is sexual. Our sex instincts is one of the biggest drives that we have, and it's to procreate. It's a God-given drive that we have, is our sex drive. And then the other instinct is our social instinct, the instinct that we have to be social creatures, to need each other, to need people around me. So when we're looking at this stuff, at where we get resentments, we usually get resentments, or we always get resentments, because one of those three have been affected. Someone's done something that either affects my self-preservation, which means it affects my job, my stability, my income, my housing situation, or it affects my sex life, or it affects my social life. What people think of me, my need to be like looked at fondly. So we're usually when we talk about a resentment comes from the word ressentir, and so what it means is to refeel. So when we look at a resentment, and it's going to go on to kind of talk about this, whether the resentment is real or fabricated, whether the person actually did something to hurt me, or it's in my mind. When it happened, they did it to me. Whether real or fancied, it says they did it to me. Every time I go over it again in my head and I replay it and I get that resentment, which means I re-feel the initial hurt, well, now I'm doing it to me. They did it the first time, but then I do it to me the next time. And the way this works, resentments, they can start off, well, I'm going to give an example of a huge of how this worked, this 4-step worked in my life. My first wife, I went through a divorce. I was in my early 20s. My son was, 2 or 3 years old. And she just one day fell out of love with me. There was no reason. I didn't see anything coming. There's no reason for it. It wasn't, you're doing this or you're doing that. It just wasn't there anymore. I didn't understand it. And she left me. We divorced. I drank at that woman for 10 years. This resentment that built and built and built. She took my son. She broke up our marriage. She wronged me. She hurt me. And I did nothing wrong. And the way it starts off is, as time goes on, it's that resentment gets bigger and bigger. My part gets less and less. The hurt gets worse and worse. And eventually 30 years later, I'm walking into the rooms of AA and I'm like, yeah, I did absolutely nothing wrong. She just, left me and I was the perfect husband. And it just builds and builds that way. Well, I do this work and I can look back and I can see that, yeah, I had a good job. I was a good provider. I did stuff around the house. I helped out with my son. But every night, I was an air conditioning mechanic at the time, and every night I stayed at the shop until almost 10 o'clock at night drinking when I could have been home at 5 o'clock. I wasn't running around on her, wasn't cheating on her, but I abandoned her in the marriage. I'd come home every night at 10 o'clock at night inebriated or just drunk. I didn't lift a finger to participate in that marriage. I gave her no choice. But I didn't see that at the time, and I held this huge resentment against her. And then I get into the rooms of AA, and I work this program, and I can look at this, and I can go, yeah, this. I had a huge part in that. It wasn't just me minding my own business, and then she hurt me. I had a definite part in that. And I'm able to let go of that resentment and see that I was a part of it all. So again, to resent is to re-feel that. And over the years, I just kept re-feeling that hurt, and she kept doing it to me. So we're going to look at these examples now and Bill W. is going to use 4 examples here. And I want you to keep in mind that all 4 of these examples are people that are in his everyday life. These are the resentments that he has. The first one is Mr. Brown. And next to it, he writes the cause. So he's resentful at him because Mr. Brown pays attention to his wife, told his wife about his mistress. may get his job at the office. So right there, he pays attention to my wife, so he's threatening his sexual relations, his sexual instinct. It's threatening his social instinct. Told my wife about my mistress, threatening the same two things. Even his security, too, because if they get divorced, the house is up. Brown may get my job at the office, so it affects his security instinct. He may no longer have a job. Or these are causes, but right next to it, it shows what it affects. We go on to Miss Jones. She's a nut. She snubbed me. She committed her husband for drinking. He's my friend. She's a gossip. Well, what did that affect? What basic instinct did that affect of those three instincts? It affected his personal relationship and his self-esteem, right? His social instincts. My employer, he's unreasonable, unjust, overbearing, threatens to fire me for drinking, and padding my expense account. That affects his self-esteem, which is the social instinct, and it affects his security, which is the self-preservation instinct. And then my wife misunderstands and nags, likes Brown, wants house put in her name. Misunderstands and nags. That affects his pride and his personal relationship with her. So that affects his social instinct. Likes Brown. That affects his, but not just his social instinct, but also his sex instinct. And wants house put in her name. That affects his security. So it affects his self-preservation instinct. So you can see how it's always because one of those three instincts is threatened and is under attack. And so we retaliate, trying to run the show and trying to make things work out the way we want to. And we get resentments against these people and act like they just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And the more we try to control it, the worse it gets. And we're in constant conflict with the people in our lives. So we went back through our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. The first thing apparent was that this world and its people were often quite wrong. People do wrong us because people live on self-will. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. And if you really think about it, how true that is. And I never used to look at my party and they wronged me. That's it. I'm angry. I'm burned up at them because they did me wrong. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. Sometimes it was remorse and then we were sore at ourselves. But the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. And so right here where it says, sometimes it was remorse and then we were sore at ourselves. And this is what happens with resentments. We hold these resentments against people, and eventually we get a self-resentment against ourselves for allowing people we feel to treat us this way. And that leads to the sickest of all for the alcoholic, and that's self-pity. The sickest an alcoholic can be, in my opinion, is living in that self-pity. And over the years, as we harbor these resentments, we begin to feel, like the book says, that the world doesn't treat us right, that we're being picked on, everyone's against us. And I wake up in the morning and I throw on that coat of self-pity and I walk out the door and come on, world, give it your best shot. And that was me for a lot of years. Drinking at the bar, don't you know, they did this and they did that and this happened and that happened and all this stuff happened to me. And in reality, it never happened to me, it just happened. And I had a big part in it. So it's plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. But with the alcoholic, whose hope is the maintenance and growth of our spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. We found that it is fatal, for when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the spirit. The insanity of alcohol returns, and we drink again. Because when I'm harboring these resentments, and the way this looks for me, is I start playing that inner dialogue, and I could be driving down the road, and I'm talking about a resentment that I have. I'm having an argument with somebody that never even happened. I'm thinking what I want to say, And I live in this, and I keep playing that movie over and over in my head, and the feeling that it gives me is terrible. And I'm harboring these feelings, and I'm getting worked up, and eventually the thought comes into my mind that, hey, I know what'll make me feel better. I know what'll make me feel better. A drink will make me feel better. And that one thought will block out, because of the obsession of the mind, that one thought will block out the thought of how alcohol will make me feel instead of what it does to me. I just think about how it's going to make me feel. And how it's going to make me feel just completely disregards the divorce courts, the jailhouses, the wrecked cars, the crying kids, all on the thought that this will make me feel better. And screw everybody, I'll show them, I'll hurt me. So, and then it says here, the insanity of alcohol returns and we drink again. And with us, to drink is to die. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. And I want to point something out here because there's one line in this book that I question, and that's this line right here. You show me a man who does not ever have anger. Show me a man who never feels anger, and I'll show you a straight-up sociopath. Anger is a normal human emotion, just like happy, just like sad. People get angry, right? I don't live in anger today. I have a healthy, appropriate response to anger. I don't live in it because I no longer hold resentments. I recognize a resentment for what it is. And so I don't live in anger, just like I don't live in happiness and I don't live in sad. People ask me I hear people in AA say all the time, yeah, but are you happy? I don't know. You mean right now? I think I said this last week. Yeah, if somebody gives me an ice cream cone, I'm happy with when I have the ice cream cone, and then it's gone. I'm no longer happy about it. I'm happy till something makes me sad. Happy is an emotion. Anger is an emotion. I still feel anger. And I felt the need to clarify that because this stuck with me for when I first came in here and I read this got under my skin that I could never be angry. And then when I did get angry, I felt like I wasn't working this program properly because something upset me and I got angry about something. Anger is a human emotion. We don't live in it. And we process it appropriately today. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, these things are poison. So that's exactly what I mean when I don't live in anger. I don't let it consume my mind with these resentments of where I'm just walking around upset at the world and the world doesn't treat me right and poor me. So we turned back to the list for it held the key to the future. We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. We began to see that the world and its people really dominated us. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, whether they really meant to hurt me, whether what they did should have hurt me, fancied or real, it still hurt me. We hear it here all the time, our feelings aren't facts, and that's very true. But I still have them. So, fancied or real, they dominate us. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, had power to actually kill. How could we escape? We saw that these resentments, these re-feelings of these wrongs, so it says right here, others wrong us, fancied or real, and then they do it to us, fancied or real. I feel it at the moment that they do it to me, and then I re-feel it that night when I go to bed. I re-feel it in the middle of the night when I wake up going, I can't believe that Joe did that, and I re-feel it the next day or whenever. And I continue to re-feel that, and it continues to build and build in me. Right? And it dominates me. And in that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, had power to actually kill because it has the power to make me think, I know what'll make me feel better, a drink, and to drink is to die. How could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? We cannot wish them away any more than alcohol. This was our course. We realized that people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Maybe they're sick too. I've always said the beautiful thing about this program is most people, we get to find out what's wrong with us. We get to find out how to be free of these resentments. Most people go to their grave never knowing what was wrong with them, why they had these feelings, why they couldn't seem to be at peace. Though we did not like their symptoms and the way they disturbed us, so we didn't like what the person did, we didn't like the way the person acted and the way it disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. We ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. And this is not easy. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God save me from being angry. See, so it says I'm angry. I'm going to be angry. God save me from being angry. I feel anger. God, take it away. Thy will be done. So, the way this translated into my recovery, my sponsor told me, just pray for that person for a week and see if it doesn't go away. And it worked. But I found the loophole to that. I just prayed that person got what they deserved. And that was my loophole for a long time. And it didn't work. Right. And so I had a person very close to me in my life, a family member that I had to pray for every day. So I still have to sometimes. God, she's sick. Please take this from her. And it was one of my siblings. And it works. It works. Because if not, I would be absolutely just going in circles in my head about these feelings that I have. We avoid retaliation or argument. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, we destroy our chance of being helpful. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. I can't explain how much this has helped me in my life. When I came into these rooms, I hated everything except for dogs and coffee, man. And everybody just pissed me off. Just the way I was. Today, I practice this in my life, and I watch anger just vanish. It comes, and it just goes. And I don't live in it. And I can literally call upon this whenever I need to. They're sick. They need help. And to be able to flip that script, how can I help this person? It's just amazing. It doesn't take much. It's just a thought. That's all it is a thought. And it heals me. Referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs of others had done. So we refer to this list and we put out of our minds what they've done. So let's go back to my first wife. I put out of my mind the fact that she fell out of love with me and just told me she wanted a divorce. I put that out of my mind and everything else that came with that. And I put that out of my mind, and we resolutely look for our own mistakes. And so I was able to do that. I was able to look, well, where was I wrong? And when I honestly do that, I could say, well, I lied almost every night and told her I was still at work. I was at work, but I wasn't working. I was having beers with the guys. I can start to see these, okay, well, I wasn't there for this. I wasn't a good husband. I would have told you I was a good husband. I wasn't a good husband. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Where were we to blame? So even though it wasn't entirely my fault, I put aside the other person completely and look at where my behavior wasn't the way I would like it to be today. The inventory was ours, not the other man's. When we saw our faults and we listed them, we placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly, and we were willing to set these matters straight. So we put it before us in black and white. We write it down. And when I write this stuff down, I mentioned this last week, when I wrote this stuff down and I could see all these things that I'm mad, when I could see my behavior throughout the years, then I had a record right in front of me. I could see it. There's no way I could be this guy that I thought so highly of myself. I'm not this guy. I'm this guy. This is who I am. It's my actions that dictate who I am, not my intentions. And I got a record of it right here in front of me now. So we admitted our wrongs honestly, and we're willing to set these matters straight. Notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Miss Jones, the employer, and the wife. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did not we ourselves set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. So we're looking at fears of the future, fears that things aren't going to work out for me, fears that I'm not good enough, people are talking about me, all these fears that I have. We're not talking about the, fear of, falling off of a ladder, a fear of heights. We're not talking about regular self-preserving fears. We're talking about these fears that are just selfish. I'm not going to get what I want, or things aren't going to work out the way that I want them to. And and I act out on those fears. That's where I try to run the show. You see this all the time when people start living in fear again. We get it in the field of treatment when someone's about to be discharged to go back home wherever they live. And about a week, we see it all the time, about a week before they're to go home, week, 2 weeks, they regress a little bit. And we start to see these character defects come back. And it's the fear. They're going home. They're living in fear over that. It's very, very normal. It's to be able to recognize that I'm living in fear. What am I afraid of? And why am I afraid of this? We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. We asked ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was even worse. So if we're living on self-will, of course I'm going to be living in fear, because self-will doesn't work out. I've failed myself so many times. If that's all I've got, me, if I'm in charge, if I'm running the show, well, God help us all, because my record shows that it doesn't work out. Of course I'm going to be living in fear if that's all I have. Perhaps there is a better way. We think so, for we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. When I trust and rely upon myself, my record shows that I fail myself. Of course I'm going to be living in fear, because I've had a record of failure relying on myself. When I rely on God, I no longer have to live in fear. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We are in the world to play the role he assigns. Just to the extent that we do as we think he would have us and humbly rely on him, does he enable us to match calamity with serenity. That line right there, to be able to match calamity with serenity. And calamity is horrible, just destruction, like bad stuff just happening. To be able to match that with serenity is amazing. And we can do that today. We show up for life today, whether it's the death of a loved one. I watched a woman in AA nursing a child that had cancer. She didn't drink over it. She wasn't drinking over it. She was matching calamity with serenity. We never apologize to anyone for depending on our Creator. We can laugh at those who think the spirituality is the way of weakness. Paradoxically, it is the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let him demonstrate through us what he can do. We ask him to remove our fear and direct our attention at what he would have us be. At once, we commence to outgrow fear. At once, we commence to outgrow fear once I begin to rely on God and not myself. And that has been my experience. I feel fear when it comes back, but I can recognize it and I can process it and I can say, what am I afraid of and why am I afraid of that in a healthy manner today? That's all I've got for today. Next week, we're going to talk about sex. We're getting into the sex inventory, so make sure you tune in.